Hello, everyone. Welcome to the School Garden Support Organization Network webinar series in the Garden to Cafeteria Toolkit, Food Safety Protocols for School Gardens webinar. We are just getting started. We're going to let everyone log on. So we'll get started in about 3 minutes. So just hold tight. Hi, everyone. If you're just joining us, welcome to the School Garden Support Organization Network webinar series. We are sharing the Garden to Cafeteria Toolkit, Food Safety Protocols for School Gardens webinar. We're going to go ahead and get started now that everyone has had a chance to kind of get on and join us. My name is Tristana Perkle. I am the Grant Programs Manager for Whole Kids Foundation. We also have us joining us today, Andrew Nowak of Slow Food USA and Tegan Hagee of the USDA Food and Nutrition Services, Office of Community Food Systems. So just to share a couple of housekeeping items before we dive in, please, we would love to hear all of your questions. So if you go to the side panel, you will see a question section. Please, throughout the course of the webinar, type in your questions, share them with us, and we will be organizing them to ask at the end of the webinar. And if we don't get to your question, we do have a record of them, so we'll follow up and answer your questions via email if we don't get to all of them. We also have a handout section, so we're really excited to share that today we have a full copy of the Garden to Cafeteria Toolkit that you can download directly, as well as the templates for each of the district's protocols that are part of the toolkit. So we'll talk about what those things mean in just a bit, but you can directly download them here today. So this webinar is a part of a webinar series put on by the SGSO-Network. SGSO stands for the School Garden Support Organization Network. We were previously called the National School Garden Network, so today is our first launch of our new name. We just really felt like the School Garden Support Organization Network was a little bit more self-explanatory of who we are and what we do, which is to connect organizations that support multiple school gardens. We seek to create dialogue, build best practices, enhance the capacity of all of our organizations across the U.S. and in the communities where we work, so as to build a powerful school garden movement. We were born out of a gathering of folks, the 2012 Farm to Cafeteria Conference, and we're comprised of an advisory council of volunteers and a network of about 2,000 members. You can find us at the National School Garden Network.org. That URL will be changing eventually, but as I mentioned, we are a group of volunteers, so that is coming soon, but wherever you go, you will be routed to the right place. So next slide, please. We operate in a couple of ways. We have a Google group that you can email to just ask questions and connect with all of the members. It's a pretty active group. And each of those questions gets posted to this Google form, which is what you see in front of you, which is another way you can kind of log on and ask questions. And each of the questions are tagged and organized into different groups of information, so feel free to jump on and explore that. And then we also seek to create opportunities for in-person networking and meeting at large national gatherings. Next slide, please. And then finally, we create opportunities for peer-to-peer learning, one of which is through our webinar series, which is what you are joining today. Today is the Garden Cafeteria Toolkit. We're taking a break over the summer, but we'll offer 2 more webinars this fall. And we also have a log of all previous webinars on our website. You can watch those there. And if you have a topic that you'd like to see or if you'd like to offer, please just send us an email to let us know. The next slide, please. So here today, we are here to share with you all about the Garden to Cafeteria Toolkit. We're going to share a definition of what Garden to Cafeteria means, how the toolkit was developed, give an overview of the toolkit, share results from the pilot implementation that we have undergone during the 2017-2018 school year, and then we'll be launching our Garden to Cafeteria community and sharing how we'll be providing ongoing support for your development of your own Garden to Cafeteria protocol. So now I'm going to switch it over to Tegan Hagee of the USDA.
Thanks so much, Tristana. I am Tegan Hagee. I work for the USDA's Food and Nutrition Service inside of the Office of Community Food Systems, and I am based in Philadelphia. I really cover the Mid-Atlantic region for the USDA's Farm to School team, providing training and technical assistance in a wide variety of farm to school topics. And I'm also lucky enough to be the school garden specialist for our team, which means that I get to handle tougher school garden questions for the whole nation, as well as collaborate with great school garden professionals all across our nation. I thought it would be helpful to give a brief definition of what the USDA means when we say farm to school and how we see school gardens fitting into that definition. So first, essentially, we consider a complete farm to school program any program that includes nutrition and agriculture education, ideally in an experiential form, with serving locally procured foods in child nutrition programs, otherwise called school meal programs. So generally, schools start with one of those things. They either start purchasing some things locally or they start with some level of educational activity. And when you have both pieces of that, that's what we consider a complete farm to school program. So certainly school gardens can be a part of a farm to school program, and often they are integral, but more and more we're seeing school gardens become the heart of a farm to school program as those school gardens grow and as those cafeterias link more closely with the gardens. So we really see when school gardens are at the heart of a farm to school program that they become a food source for school meal programs. They'll also serve as that experiential food system education, teaching students where their food come from. And of course, they serve as a natural outdoor classroom for educators for a variety of topics, including food, nutrition, and agriculture. Next slide. Great. And so what is Garden to Cafeteria? And essentially this is a working definition that Andy and his group are working with. And essentially it is really a protocol that was developed to make sure that students can harvest produce from school gardens specific for providing food for child nutrition programs. And when that is the case, there are definitely food safety considerations that you want to take into place. It also really creates a partnership between the cafeteria and the garden, as well as the cafeteria school leaders and garden leaders. So it creates that full connection, and the garden really becomes part of the school as opposed to being sort of an adjunct to the school. And it definitely closes the loop in the minds of students between fresh food production and consumption. And here I'm going to turn things over to Andy, who's going to give you some history about how the toolkit was developed.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrew Nowak. I am the manager of the National School Garden Program for Slow Food USA. And based here in Denver, Colorado, I've been working school gardens with Denver Public Schools and other Front Range school districts for the past 17 years. And this toolkit that we're sharing with you today came out of some work that started back in 2010 in Denver Public Schools. At that time, we had about 40 or 50 school gardens across the district in Denver Public Schools. and the food service department had just started their local procurement from local farms in the state of Colorado. And I was approached by the food service director at the time, Leo Lesh, asking, could he buy produce from the school gardens that we had distributed across the district? And I said, well, I know the school gardens are certainly interested in that. And so we began the project of trying to define how do we grow and harvest that school garden produce safely so that we can use it in the cafeteria to be served during their meals. And so my first step was to partner with the Denver Department of Environmental Health, which is the health department in Denver County, at which Denver Public Schools resides. And they were very excited to work with me. And I shared this short story just because I think in most cases, your local health department will be a champion of these efforts if they understand that you want to proceed using food safety protocols and other safety measures so that everyone can be assured that the food is going to be safe. But when we started this in 2010, we couldn't find any other district protocols around the country that were harvesting produce at such a scale. And so I was directed by the USDA to look at the good agricultural practices and good handling practices, GAP and GIP, that the USDA has in place for farmers. And these are a set of protocols that farmers follow on a large scale. And so I took those protocols and pared them down to be relevant to school gardens and created a document for Denver Public Schools about 6 pages long that focused on the water sources for school gardens, worker health, in our case would be student health, how we use compost, harvest equipment, and sanitation methods. And so drawing from the GAP and GIP protocols, I created garden and cafeteria protocols for Denver Public Schools. And so in the fall of 2010, using these new protocols that both the food service department and the Department of Environmental Health were comfortable with, Slow Food Denver started training school garden leaders and kitchen managers on how to harvest and handle the fresh produce coming into the kitchens. And we launched the garden and cafeteria program in 20 school gardens in the fall of 2010. The actual program looked like a weekly harvest at those 20 schools. A small group of students with 1 or 2 volunteers from our garden program would harvest produce usually the beginning of the week on a Monday or Tuesday, and then present that produce to the cafeteria manager that same morning after the students weighed it and recorded it on an invoice. And it's been so successful that the program still continues to this day. We do keep track of how many pounds of produce that have gone from school gardens. In the 8 years since the inception of this program, we have harvested over 9,000 pounds of garden produce that has been used in the cafeteria, the vast majority of that being used on the salad bars that are now in every school in Denver Public Schools. So with that success in Denver Public Schools and the fact that we were sharing our protocols with other school districts across the nation, I got very excited by a granting opportunity that the Whole Kids Foundation offered in 2016 called the Innovation Grant. And the Innovation Grant was looking for the next big projects around school gardens. And I proposed to the Whole Kids Foundation that we design an actual garden and cafeteria toolkit using the success of Denver and a couple other school districts, and get this toolkit out so that other school districts can follow the lead of these school districts and actually produce their own garden and cafeteria programs. So the Innovation Grant got funded by Whole Kids Foundation, and it had 2 different components. In the first component, I actually wrote the toolkit and I'll share parts of that with you here later in the show. But the toolkit consists of 6 chapters and then a handout of garden cafeteria protocols from other school districts. And I think it's the combination of the process defined in the toolkit and the use of the templates that really makes this a valuable resource. And then we launched, once the toolkit was ready, we launched into a pilot program. We posted through both Slow Food and Whole Kids the opportunity for school districts to be part of the pilot program. We got a decent response from about a dozen school districts, and we picked 3 school districts that we felt had the school garden programs that were ready for this and the eagerness of the food and nutrition department to participate. So we selected 3 school districts to be part of the pilot program, which involved me visiting them twice over the span of a couple months. First, to implement the toolkit with them, and then second, come back when their protocols are ready and actually help train their garden leaders and their kitchen managers on how to use the protocols that they developed. So here is a front cover picture of the actual toolkit. And I've had some recent conversations with school districts about this toolkit, and there seems to be perhaps a slight misunderstanding of how the toolkit works. So I want to make sure this is clear. The toolkit lays out a process of how to develop food safety protocols. The toolkit itself does not contain food safety protocols or does not contain rules that you need to put into your protocols, but it lays out a process. And I'll show that process here in a little bit. The second part of what we're offering, though, is a collection of actual garden cafeteria protocols from 6 districts from around the country. And we hope that list will grow as others develop their protocols. The idea being there's no reason to start from scratch in this process. Other districts are already doing garden cafeteria. Here are their protocols. Now use them as a template. We have permission from all these districts for you just to copy word by word. If you're happy with the way Austin, Texas, Austin Independent School District does their garden and cafeteria program, copy word for word from their protocols and implement them yourself. My guess is you're going to find a set of protocols that really speaks to your district. You're going to tweak them a little bit, and then you're going to set up your own set of protocols. That's the way the toolkit is ideally designed to work. Lead you through the process of tweaking somebody else's protocols to come up with your own set of protocols. So inside the toolkit are 6 chapters, and they basically lead you, again, through this process of chapter 1, forming a garden cafeteria committee of all the important stakeholders in your district who want to have a say in how this program gets implemented. We would talk about school garden leaders. We would talk about someone from the school kitchens, probably the food service director, someone from your district associated with risk management or facilities because school gardens are on the grounds of the school district. You design your own committee, and then the rest of the toolkit will lead that committee through a process of designing the actual protocols. In subsequent webinars starting in August, and we're going to share that schedule with you, we are going to go through each of these chapters 2 at a time in webinars starting in August. So I'm not going to go into detail today about how these chapters are laid out, but we'll start that process in August. So we hope you can join us then. So the toolkit was finished back in about a year ago from today. And then we launched the pilot program, and we selected 3 school districts, Bellingham Public School District in Bellingham, Washington, Pittsburgh Unified School District in Pittsburgh, California, and Cypress Fairbanks Independent School District in Houston, Texas. Today, I want to talk about the Bellingham pilot program because they were the first of the 3 to actually complete their process and now have a garden cafeteria program up and running. we were able to, I was able to go to Bellingham 2 weeks before the Farm to Cafeteria conference to participate in their launch. And I want to show you a couple pictures from that launch. I want to give a lot of credit to Patrick Durgan, the director of the food service department for Bellingham School District, and Laura Plott, their partner. Laura is executive director of the Common Threads Farm, and Common Threads Farm is the community partner that helps out with the school gardens. So between Patrick and Laura and their staff, they did a really great job using the toolkit to design their own set of protocols and now have a gardening cafeteria program up and running. So I have several pictures from that launch. That's me there in the background, but up in the foreground are a couple students. We were in there in a greenhouse on the grounds of a middle school, and we were harvesting the last of the kale crop from their overwintering process. So this was mid-April in Bellingham. So we were targeting kale for this harvest, and these are middle school students harvesting with me. Once the produce was harvested, these are some staff members of the Common Threads Farm. They're actually AmeriCorps members, and they were showing the students how to weigh the produce using a simple scale and allotting for the weight of the bin. We like to keep track of the weights of the produce coming out of the gardens because I think that's something tangible that we can share with others about this project. I then took the kale into the middle school kitchen, and this is their kitchen manager, and together we were working on first how to clean the kale. That's not in this picture, but we went through a process of in their kitchen sinks of how to do a thorough cleaning of the kale. And then I'm demonstrating here how to make a kale salad. I had a very simple lemon garlic vinaigrette recipe that we made with the kitchen folks. And if I have to imagine we all eat kale these days, there's probably even a debate among yourselves. Do you massage kale or do you just mix the kale with the vinaigrette? And here we are demonstrating to the kitchen staff on the bowl on the left, I'm massaging the kale with the vinaigrette, and the bowl on the right, we were just mixing the vinaigrette with the kale. And this is always a discussion amongst my friends. I have to tell you, in this kitchen, the kitchen folks were not excited about the kale because they all claim they don't eat much kale. But the massaging with the lemon garlic vinaigrette made a huge difference for them. And the two end products, we have the massage salad on the left and the mixed salad on the right. You can see we added some other ingredients. We had shaved radishes and carrots. We did some pumpkin seeds, some dried cranberries. And then the yellow flowers on top are actually kale flowers from some of the kale plants, because they had matured to the point that they were in the flower stage. And so we put the flowers on the salad too. And then this was put out on the salad bar side by side. And I remember getting a report later that the massaged kale salad was the big hit of the students. So we're very proud of Bellingham, and again, the work of Patrick and Laura to put this, get the protocols developed through their committees. And I was very proud to be part of the start of that process, and then the launch of their salad, the kale salad coming out of their middle school garden. So I'm going to turn this over to Tristana, and no, actually I think I'm going to do this part, right, Tristana? So we have successfully completed the pilot program. We're still going to go. We still have the launches of the gardening cafeteria programs for Pittsburgh and Cypress Fairbanks. They're going to be in early September, but we're now moving on with the launch of the toolkit. And we wanted to design some support systems around the toolkit. The pilot program was great. I'm very thankful for the support of Whole Kids to allow me to go visit these districts during the pilot phase. But this is just not going to be practical for me to visit all of you guys during your work with the toolkit. So we wanted to come up with other virtual ways that I can support you through using the toolkit. And we're going to call this the Garden to Cafeteria Community. The idea is we're all going to work together as one big community of school gardens and school food service to implement the toolkit and launch a whole bunch of garden cafeteria programs in your districts. So this community is going to have at least 4 components. And I need to share with you, we are still developing this concept of the garden cafeteria community. So there may be some tweaks and some even some more additions to the support that we're going to offer you guys. But for right now, the community is going to look like this. Starting in August, I'm going to host the monthly webinars with the Whole Kids Foundation, in which we're going to go through the toolkit step by step. And some of you will just be starting with the toolkit, and we can help you get started. Some of you maybe already got started but have some questions or some issues. And this would be a place for us to gather as a big group to discuss the toolkit and the successes and challenges that you're having with it. Also during the month, I will offer office hours. We'll probably set this up again as a webinar format so that we can get a whole bunch of people together at the same time. But basically just opening it up for questions and discussions. And so, you know, maybe once a month for a regular webinar, and then once or twice a month for office hours is what we're looking at. We're also developing a website for the Garden Cafeteria Toolkit that's going to have a bunch of resources, and I'm going to show you that website here in a minute. And then you can always email me. If you have an immediate question that you would like to have me address, just email me at my slowfoodusa.org address, and I'll do my best to get back to you within the day. So this will be the beginning of what we're going to call the Garden Cafeteria Community. And let me see here. So here's kind of the rough schedule of the upcoming webinars. We haven't declared any specific dates yet, but for the month of August, we'll start working on chapters 1 and 2 of the toolkit. September, chapters 3 and 4, and October, 5 and 6. For each of those webinars, I'll have some other guests with me, probably guests from the pilot school districts that we've been working with, and I'll have them share with you how they did the work assigned in those chapters and how the process worked for them, so that we can learn from the districts that have been successful in implementing these programs. So Tristana, I think you're going to give us the website now.
Yes, hi everybody. Andy, if you want to go to the website, I can kind of walk us through.
You want me to click on it? Okay. Oh yeah, no wait, that's right. I have it. I'm sorry guys, I'm just catching up here on the technology. There we go. I got it. All right. Very good. All right, so this is a page on the Whole Kids Foundation website. It's wholekidsfoundation.org. If you click under resources, resources, and then under topics, you'll come to the Garden to Cafeteria Toolkit. Are you seeing everything here, Tristana, that I'm seeing?
Yes, yes. You'll go to resources,
okay,
and then to school resources, and then to Garden Cafeteria Toolkit. And just
toolkit.
We're doing a website redesign, folks, so this will be a lot more easier to navigate too. But this is the best way to get there.
All right. So right now the website has some resources already set up for you. Again, as Tristana said, it's probably going to change a little bit, but there's enough here for you to get started. We talk about the toolkit here in the top part of the page. Here are the 5 school districts that we have protocols already uploaded here to the web page for you to download so that you can use them in the design of your protocols. The sixth one that will join this real soon will be the Bellingham protocols. They are just tweaking theirs right now, finishing them up, making them look pretty, and we'll get them up here with the rest of these protocols. But you can see we've got a nice sampling. Austin, Chicago, Denver, San Diego, and Atlanta. Some rather large school districts from different parts of the country. The Denver protocols were used in each of these, in the development of each of these, in one way or the other. And as you go through these protocols, you'll be amazed how similar yet how different they are. And that's why we wanted to share them, because I think a set of protocols will draw you more than another set of protocols. So under the next section, how can I get started? Here's a link. If you want the load a free version, a PDF version of the toolkit, just click that, and you'll get a download of the toolkit itself, full color, all its glory. We're very happy to share that with you. But also be sure to click down the sample garden cafeteria protocols listed here, number 2. That's a very simple document, basically just photocopies of the PDFs from these other districts put all into one bundle. And this will be a living document, because as we get other protocols from other districts, we'll add them to this document too. So it will grow over time, but there's enough here for you to get started and for you to, begin the process of developing your own protocols. We're going to have an FAQ section here. Questions that you guys ask today will be the beginning of that FAQ section. And as I develop the answers for them, we'll get them posted up here on the web page so that you can refer to some of these standard questions. And then the garden cafeteria community, like I've described. As I scroll down here, this is a link to a third-party publisher. So if you want your own hard copy, spiral-bound hard copy of the toolkit, they are being sold for $25 a piece. You can order that through this third-party publisher. You click on this, and it'll send you directly to that publisher, and then you fill out the form, and they will be shipped directly to you. A little bit more here about the garden cafeteria community, my email address to get a hold of me. And then we want to build a section here around the success stories. So the first success story will be Bellingham Public Schools. We are collecting photographs from them, and they're going to help us write a short story on their success. And as you complete the process in your school district, we would love for you to share those with us. So I think Tristan and I are going to design a form that you can fill out to submit your success story. And that will be coming up here on this section too. And that way you can share your success and then come here and look at other school district successes too. We really want to build this to be a robust story about, the importance of garden and cafeteria in the bigger farm to school world. All right, now if I can handle my technology, I'm going to go back. Nope. I don't want to go there. I want to go there. Back to the PowerPoint. All right. So we've all seen the web page, and it's up and running, and it's going to be changing over time. Now it's time to hear from you. We have plenty of time for your questions. Again, we have Tristana from Whole Kids. We've got Tegan from the USDA, and you got me from Slow Food. All three of us contributed to this toolkit, and so we'll direct the questions to one of the three of us that is best suited to answer your questions. And if you want to ask the question now, please type it into the chat box on your right-hand side. Tristana is going to read the questions out loud. If you want to send a question to me, just email it to me, and I'll deal with your emails in the next day or two. And there's my address there. So Tristana, do we have questions?
Yes, we do. We have a couple of questions to start. And again, as any come up, please enter them in the question chat box. We do have some time to kind of create a conversation here. So Megan asked, how do you know when your school is ready to implement a garden to cafeteria program?
Good question. Good question. What we were looking for in the pilot program was districts that have school gardens. And, you know, I can't say how many school gardens because there are districts of different sizes, different number of schools. You know, if your district has 10 schools and 5 of them have gardens, I'd say that there's enough gardens to get started. Basically, you want a garden program that has been around for a couple of years, that has figured out, you know, the system of growing food, working with the kids, has sufficient help, be it volunteers or maybe you're partnering with a local, you know, nonprofit gardening group or whatever. You know, so I always describe it as a robust school garden program, but that can even have different definitions. You definitely need gardens that are growing food, and the confidence that you have the leadership in those gardens to implement the protocols that you're going to design. On the flip coin of that is the school kitchens. You definitely want the support of the food and nutrition department for your district. I don't see this being successful if you have to fight your way with the food and service nutrition department. So, you know, having a nutrition department on board is going to be key. School, you know, often we talk about the infrastructure inside the school kitchens. Do they have produce sinks? Do they have, you know, sufficient, you know, knives and cutting boards, you know, and have the staff been trained with how to handle whole, raw, fresh produce? Even if you answer no to some of those questions, it doesn't mean you can't implement a garden cafeteria program. We're just going to have to come up with the systems to make sure that we can handle the produce safely. You know, ideally, the school kitchens are already handling whole, raw, fresh produce through their farm to school program, through the local procurement. But sometimes the garden cafeteria program is the first time the kitchen is handling whole, raw, fresh produce. I would be more than happy to work with your district to come up with ways other than a produce sink, or, you know, perhaps we design a very simple kitchen kit that we could use to implement the garden cafeteria program. So I hope that wasn't too long of an answer, but basically, I think almost any district can be ready once you have the garden and once you have interest from the school kitchens.
Andy, could I add something quickly onto that? I think that my answer would be any time that you have a garden and that is growing edible products and you want students to taste those products on a regular basis, that means that your school should start to take the first steps to implement your garden to cafeteria program. So I think, as Andy mentioned, really any size garden can be ready for that. It doesn't have to be enough to fill a salad bar, for example. That will only happen in very rare circumstances. It really is just about connecting students to eating the food on a regular basis that's growing there, or tasting the food on a regular basis that's growing there, or displaying the food inside of the cafeteria, bringing the food into the cafeteria in some way. To me, that school is ready.
You make some good points there, Tegan, and the advantage of having a garden cafeteria protocol in place is that it also gives you the food safety protocols for other types of programs, like cooking classes, like tasting, even donation programs. If you're donating the food to local food banks, you want to handle that food as safely as you can, and having these protocols in place takes you a long way down that road to really having a very good food safety program. And so there is a big advantage. I know of a lot of school garden programs that aren't putting the food into the cafeteria at this point, but they have set up some basic food safety protocols just so that the kids can handle the food in a safe way out in the garden or in their cooking class. I think these protocols and partnering up with the food service department really takes it to the next step, because the food service department is the expert in food safety, And if we are working with them in cooperation, then we know we have a pretty good, robust set of food safety protocols.
Great, thank you. Thank you both. Yeah, I think it was really great to emphasize, you know, this program is really about the protocols and allowing you to bring them inside, no matter how big or small. A lot of you have asked questions about, you know, how much volume and what size garden and, you know, can we do in a greenhouse? So I hope that answers most of your questions, that even just the smallest handful, this toolkit will help you just go through those safety protocols. A quick question, go for it, Andy.
Oh, I just wanted to touch a little bit on what you talk about volume.
Okay.
It should be noted that this is not necessarily a procurement process. You're not supplying the kitchen with all the produce it needs for even a day of service. This is an educational program for students to see what it takes to grow and deliver that food into the cafeteria. So I've seen successful garden cafeteria programs based on a pint of cherry tomatoes. Yeah, those cherry tomatoes might only feed 20, 30 kids, even if they're cut in half, but they're displayed on the salad bar, the green salad that's already on the salad bar. And if you put the right kind of signage on the salad bar and say, today, the cherry tomatoes came from your school garden, then the kids are learning a lot about the fact that what they're growing in their school garden is good, healthy food that is valued by the cafeteria folks to be served to the greater school population. So don't be discouraged if you've got a small garden. It's not about volume. It's about the opportunity for kids to see the process of growing, harvesting, and delivering that food into the cafeteria.
Great, thank you. So we got a question, do we work with private schools as well as public schools? This is both Slow Food and Whole Kids Foundation, and yes, absolutely, we work with all schools as long as you are working with children in the grade range of K through 12 and, you know, are an accredited institution. We recognize that these protocols are very much geared towards public schools and, you know, and being compliant with the National Reimbursable Lunch Program. But again, the toolkit is a kind of a step-by-step process that you can adopt however you see fit. So we've got a question from a nonprofit wanting to kind of use it in their way. Please use it as you would like. Again, it's free to download. It's really just kind of a roadmap. And so we got another question that's about, you know, what's the initial step to start a garden to cafeteria program? And what we would say is download the toolkit, and you'll see it really goes by, you know, each chapter has an activity at the end of each chapter and kind of walks you through step by step what we think is necessary and helpful to help you go along that process. So building off of that, you know, can you answer, Andy or Tegan, you know, what do the district food services work with the garden to, and how do they work with them to incorporate the harvest into their menu, as the menu is often published far in advance and hard to sync to the timing of the harvest or unexpected low high yield of the garden? Can you talk about menu planning?
Yeah, Andy,
Yep.
Let me just touch on this briefly. Okay, great. That's a great question. So I alluded to this earlier, but generally most school gardens are not producing enough to really create a full meal. So generally it's sort of an addition. So I'll just describe a few scenarios that I've seen. The first one is with green leaf lettuce and entree entree salads were created, and each salad had 2 to 3 leaves of green leaf lettuce that was grown in the garden that looked markedly different. And the students, there was only enough, I think this was a relatively large school, they serve about 500 lunches a day, and there was only enough to really go into 200 salads, which is a lot of entree salads if you're in food service, and all of those entree salads went. The kids were so excited to be able to see their school garden lettuce in those salads. So that's one example, which, just to be clear, that's growing a similar product to what you already have menued. So those salads were already menued, and adding green leaf, and even if it's a different varietal, to green leaf menus that are already marketed is one approach. Another approach is putting something on a salad bar, so it's not necessarily part of, in this might be getting a little bit too meal patterny for everyone on the call, but it might not necessarily be the vegetable for your meal pattern that you're promoting that day, but it is an additional vegetable that's offered. And we find that that works best with things like radishes or beets, something along those lines. So it's an addition to a salad on a salad bar. And the third option is growing something that you know is a specific color, that you know you do have enough to serve a relatively large amount, whether it's sweet potatoes or carrots, and having it listed on the menu, giving a little bit of flexibility within that week to just have a red, orange garden menu item that can be switched. It's really around that communication. There is some flexibility with vegetables inside of a week and inside of a month. So even if the menu is printed, as long as there's a vegetable substituting that vegetable and they meet their sub requirements, that's totally fine and acceptable. So being able to have some flexibility, I think, is really, a key to this success. And Andy, I'll turn things over to you.
And that's a great description from the kitchen perspective and from the menu planning. I'm going to give the answer from the garden perspective, in that in the training that we give in Denver around the garden cafeteria, we really emphasize the communication. And so in the gardens, school gardens that have been around for a while, they're pretty good at knowing when they're going to have, what kind of produce, and when the school year starts in August and they're harvesting in the fall, they can give the kitchen, a heads up. Hey, in a couple of weeks, we're going to have a bumper crop of cucumbers. Do you have a cucumber salad that you can, mix up? So we really emphasize communication. The program, in Denver, the program's been running so well for so long that the kitchen and the garden leaders get together to discuss at the beginning of the growing season, what would you like to see in the kitchens this year from the school gardens? And so we're actually doing crop planning with the kitchens in anticipation of harvest later in the fall. And from those kind of discussions, herb gardens are being planted because the kitchen staff want to add fresh herbs to their sauces or to their tacos. Things like cucumbers and carrots that grow really well in Colorado and that we grow in abundance are being planned for specific salads. And so, that communication takes time to develop, and it may not happen right at the very beginning of a garden cafeteria program. But over time, that relationship between the school garden leaders and the kitchen managers is really important to develop, so that there is no surprises coming from the garden, and that there is some sort of schedule worked out on the harvest, so that the kitchens are prepared. And then one final note, in the protocols, you can always specify what kind of vegetables you want to be coming from the school gardens. So if your kitchens can't handle, root vegetables or potatoes because they need to be, baked, and you don't have enough oven space, then, in your protocols, specify that for the time being, we're only ready to receive vegetables that can be eaten raw, that require minimal preparation and probably going to be served on a salad or on the salad bar. That's perfectly allowable, and the gardens will adjust to that fact. And then hopefully, as the kitchens increase their infrastructure and they develop new menus, we can, in the future, implement things like sweet potatoes and cooked beets and things like that. But we need to have the kitchens ready before the gardens grow those kind of things. So communication and planning works really well for this case.
Great, thank you. Another question from Libby. Are the cafeterias purchasing the school garden produce versus it being donated for free? And does the toolkit provide guidance for this?
This question always comes up, Tegan. You can't avoid it.
Yeah, great question. The short answer is yes, the toolkit does address procurement, because what you're talking about is Procurement if your school meal program participates in the National School Lunch Program or any child nutrition program, then as they are public funds, schools need to abide by procurement regulations. And the thing that I love presenting on is actually garden procurement, because there are more options when procuring from school gardens and paying for that product than you generally have. And the toolkit goes into detail, and I believe that we will be touching upon that in a webinar that's coming up later on. It comes in chapter 5. So if you download the toolkit to the right, you'll notice in chapter 5 it has the answer to your questions, and we'll also be taking questions directly. And you're always welcome to email me if you have specific questions as well. It's the type of question that I answer all the time if you're wondering about what's going to work for you in your specific situation.
Yes, and it's a great question. From the beginning, Denver Public Schools insisted on paying for the produce from the school gardens. And I think that was a very fair decision by the food service department. There are costs in growing food, even in a school garden, and school gardens need to recover the costs that go into the gardens with the kids. And so there are ways to be compensated for that produce coming out of the school gardens. And I really think it's important that the kids see that their work and the value of their produce is being respected by the process. And so, whether it's, and again, as Tegan said, there are different ways of doing it, either directly paying for it or basically trading, supplies for produce. And, we're not going to get into the weeds today, but in many different ways, there are ways to compensate the school gardens for the produce. And so the toolkit does go through that, and we're going to go through that in more detail in a later webinar.
And Andy, I just also, because we are talking about guides, the USDA put out a full guide called Procuring Local Foods for Child Nutrition Programs. And on page 82, yes, there are more than 82 pages, it goes over all of the ways that child nutrition programs can purchase products from the school garden specifically. And that's available as well on our USDA Farm to School website, and it has other information about procuring local foods for child nutrition programs.
Perfect, thank you. Another question, will this work with non-traditional gardens such as hydroponics? And the answer is yes. This toolkit helps you implement edible food, edible garden produce into your cafeteria. It doesn't matter where it comes from, but do either of you want to touch on hydroponics at all? Yeah, we have dealt with some hydroponic rules. Denver Public Schools has growing towers in some of their schools that are growing, greens, and those are being used. There are chemicals typically associated with the hydroponics that we just need to be careful with. And so the protocols that are actually developed would have, those considerations in place for the unique nature of growing in hydroponics. But we're recognizing that that's an increasing way of that many school districts are starting to grow food to show kids, even in an urban school district where you don't have a patch of dirt, you can still grow food in a classroom using hydroponics. And that food is just as safe if handled properly as school garden produce. So let's find a way for the kids to enjoy it too. Great, thank you. And Andy mentioned that he looked through the GapGift Guidelines and pulled out those most pertinent to school gardens. Would you be able to share those? And those are actually included in the toolkit. Andy covers each of the ones that he pulled out and how they relate to how they can be used and as you build the protocols. Is that right, Andy?
Yeah, in the appendices of the toolkit is a description of the GapGift protocols and then the ones that were specific to the school gardens. So, if you are a protocol geek like me and like going through those kind of things, I recommend you go through the GapGift checklists that are available. They're about 40 pages long each. And it's really interesting to see what the farmers have to go through. But I hope I did the work for everybody and doing it for school gardens and getting it down to just a handful of pages. Yes, it's described in the toolkit.
Great, thank you. Can school nutrition funds be used to fund a school garden?
I'll take this one. So
Yeah.
in short, the short answer is sometimes yes. It's really dependent upon that particular program and the financial status of that program. The USDA Farm to School team, my team, has put out a few different memos outlining all of the different ways that child nutrition program funds can be used to support and expand school gardens, including paying for things like seeds and supplies, as well as hoop houses, and staff and partial staff funding as well. And you'll also find those memos. Andy, are they linked in the toolkit? I forget if those garden memos, I think that they...
The 2009 and
2015.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Those are actual copies of the memos are in the toolkit.
Okay, great. So in the back of the toolkit that you can download there are the copies. You can also go to our website, but it's probably easier to look in the back of the toolkit for the printed out memos where it really outlines that. And again, if you have more specific questions, you can email me.
Great, awesome. Is there a template for tracking quantity, price, monies received, a budget ledger for income and costs, in other words, in the toolkit?
No, not at this point. But we'd be very happy to work with somebody on developing one that they find useful for their program, and we can share that with everybody else. In the toolkit is a form, I think it's from the Denver program, where the school gardens are tracking the amount of produce coming out of the gardens, and creating a simple invoice that the kitchen manager signs off on, and that becomes the record of the harvest into the cafeteria. So there's I think there's a couple, and then in each of the protocols that we've shared, Austin's got a nice form, San Diego's got a nice form that you can use to track the garden produce. We don't have similar forms coming from the school kitchens, though.
We do have forms that absolutely could be used in the back of our Procuring Local Foods for Child Nutrition Programs guide that track micro and informal purchase procedures. And there's also an example of a forward contract that could be used for a garden that includes all of the information that that individual was requesting. So they don't specifically say garden at the top, but it has all of the different categories that you would want to keep track of for procurement purposes there.
And that sounds like something perfect that we could put onto the new Garden Cafeteria webpage and add that to the FAQ section and have a link to that. Does that sound reasonable, Tegan?
Sure, we can. I can see. Yeah.
Yep. Send that to me, and then we can make whatever works from there. So that was a great question.
Great. Well, we'll follow up with just one last question. I know you all asked so many questions. It's absolutely amazing. Here is our contact information up on the slide. And again, we are diving into each part of the toolkit in the fall to really help you go through this if you'd like to, kind of work with us directly as you go through it. But we'll end with one last question. How often should voluntary audits be done if you are not certified naturally grown versus CNG?
Wow. I'm guessing that's coming from the school garden or from the agricultural perspective. Every state handles their certification of school gardens differently. Here in Colorado, we don't have to certify our school gardens. We have developed school garden manuals so that garden leaders have all the current protocols on how we work with school gardens in the district, but there is no other certification process that we need to go through. I know states like Arizona have a little bit more of a rigid certification program. I think it's a one-time certification. I don't think it's an annual certification. So I don't know, Tegan, do you have any experience with these, or you know, my best advice is to check with your representative in your state.
Tristana, could you just repeat the question quickly? I think that I didn't hear it correctly.
Yes. How often should voluntary audits be done if you are not certified naturally grown? And it says versus CNG. I'm not quite sure what that means.
Yeah, I'm gonna sort of back up with what Andy was saying. It is a rare state that has a certification process for their school gardens. They don't necessarily need to have any certification to bring anything into the cafeteria. And I just want to take this moment to note that GAP and GIP are voluntary guidelines. They're not mandatory for any agricultural practice at this point. And there are other certification programs and other food safety guidelines that they don't necessarily have to be GAP with a capital G. There can just be GAP with the lowercase g, good agricultural practices. So you know, that those again are voluntary certification programs that are not needed to bring garden products into the cafeteria from the USDA's perspective.
And I'll just, one last thing from our perspective, from the school garden world, I have been helping several school districts develop school garden manuals for their gardens so that there are safe practices in all aspects of the school garden. And if you're interested in seeing some of those manuals, I'd be happy to share templates of, you know, those actual manuals so that you can use them as templates for developing your own school garden manuals for your district. I highly recommend these manuals if the district is really getting into the school gardens and they're becoming quite popular. Having a district-wide manual is a great way to help assure that the gardens are being used safely, they're being implemented in the way that a district sees them. So email me and I'd be happy to share those with you.
Great. Well, thank you. Well, with that, we will go ahead and wrap up our time here today. I want to say a big thank you to Andrew Nowak for all of his work on this toolkit and for all the support he'll be providing going forward. Thank you, Tegan, for your support and your expertise and your knowledge, and I'm sure to many reassurance for the stamp of approval from the USDA. And thank you all for joining and for your interest in this program. We're really excited to share, and we hope you'll reach out to us and let us know your journey. We'd love to talk to you and hear about how you're using the toolkit, and then eventually share your success story. So thank you all so much. We're going to close out, and we will talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.